Hello, welcome back to People Are People, episode 3. I was totally not feeling it today. It's just, human. But I really wanted to get this story out, get this session out, because I think it's an important one. Um, it's about what are you in therapy for, or what should you be in therapy for? I'm currently not in therapy. I think that it is an important thing for a lot of people. I generally use my mom and my sisters and my good friends as my therapists, and I'm lucky that I have that. I'm lucky I can go to my husband. He's a man of few words, but I can go tell him anything. It's like my little diary. And I know how blessed that makes me. But we all have stories and we all have a journey and we all have something that we need to share, and it's better getting it out. So, I mentioned that I have a tragic story. My father's death was horrifying. And after he died, I have a beautiful family. I have children I'm raising. I have an amazing husband, amazing mother and sisters. And still, the void of losing my father was something that I don't wish on anyone. I don't ever wish that feeling on anyone. Um, and someone told me, you have to go talk to someone. And so I did. So I go to this lady on Zoom, it's COVID. And she was nice. She was fine. I wasn't wowed by her personality, but she was fine. I wasn't there to judge her. She was supposed to give me coping skills, right? Some tools. And so I go meet with her. And the first day she tells me a story of how her father died. She says that she was young. I mean, she was like, early 20s, and she was in the car with her father and her mother and sister, and they went to get a newspaper, which is hilarious because it's a very different time. And the man had a heart attack driving. And that is like the epitome of tragic, unexpected, cruel, frankly, cruel to the family. Um, and I remember thinking, my gosh, everyone has a tragic story. Everyone has their own pieces. It's funny. I had a teacher, I don't know, 7th grade, and I guess maybe I was older. Maybe I was like 11th grade. And she had cancer. She had lost her son to cancer. Her husband was gone. And she said, but still, if we all you've heard this a million times, if we all put our problems in a bag in the center of a room, we'd all pick our own back. And I think we would. And because we know, what we're working with. So, but it was a big deal for me to go because I didn't, as open as I am, I didn't want to expose myself to her. Um, and I also didn't know if I wanted to hear what she had to say. But what I did learn that day is that we all have something to get through. My closest friend, her father died when she was young, also tragic. And I sort of just assumed that, like, when someone else's dad dies or when someone else experiences tragedy, that you feel like a kindred relief. Maybe I just ignorantly thought that it would be relief for her. And I realized immediately after my father died that she felt no relief. And then not long after I lost my dad, other people I knew were losing their loved ones and their fathers and mothers. And I was like, there's no relief. There's no joy for the person mourning their own when your dear friend or someone is also mourning theirs. There's no relief. You wish that they did not have to feel the agony that you feel. And it's so interesting to sometimes see things from another perspective. There was a woman who did like small business podcasts years ago I used to listen to. And one day she said that her business did not launch until her father died. And I remember my dad was alive and well at the time. And I remember thinking how disgusting that is, that she's suggesting that you have to lose something so dear for growth. But then my dad died in November, and the house I had been dreaming about chasing, literally, this house, for 6 years. Every day I would drive by, I would contact them, I would try to find a way to make it work. In July, I got the dream house, and we've gone to mediums, which is next week's topic. I don't know if you're into, the other side. I believe we're just beyond the veil. I think there's just a veil separating us from the other side. That's why I think my dad is able to come in dreams, but this is all next week's topic. But I think that once you experience, your own loss and your own grief, um, you realize that everyone has it, and um, you don't feel better. You don't feel relieved, and you don't wish it on anyone else. But also, um, what you're doing with it after. So when this medium said to me, your dad went and whispered in the seller's ear. And I believed her because it was pretty dramatic. They actually had told us to put our house up for sale prior, when my dad was still living, and we did. And then they said, never mind, we're not going to sell it. And so I went and found a different house that we didn't end up loving. Um, and we took our house down. The day my dad died, I took it off the market, and I was just done. I was done. It was a very dark time. And so 6 months later, we're moving in to this dream house. And so I don't think that you need to lose someone and something earth shattering has to happen. But I do think that good things still happen after they're gone. And maybe there's a little divinity involved. So actually I met someone today, totally ironically. We're still dealing with this roof issue. It's very charming. If you were here a couple weeks ago, my light bulb blew from the leaking. So it's snow. There's snow on the roof. So we're not quite sure yet what happened. But anyway, um, I was talking to him totally just about like business, about the roof and insurance and things like that. And he went on to share his story with me about his wife, who, he still feels, and he was a young man. He lost her young. She was ill shortly, just a very short time. And it was so interesting because he is still finding the good as well. But he explained that he struggled in business and he was growing it, and she was there for all of it. And now she's gone, and he has his most profound success. And so, but I said, because you're careful and I said, well, do you think like she had anything to do with it? And he's like, 100%. But he's actually able to talk to her, which I think is super cool. And it's funny when you're talking to this like buttoned up businessman, um, and they too, have the beliefs because of what they've seen. So, anyways, what should you be in therapy for, or what are you in therapy for? Um, I think I've mentioned, and that will be soon. I'm working on that, but I'm working on a cemetery project, which should not be my project. And there's a local cemetery that a lot of my family members are buried in, and the people in charge are not doing a good job of keeping it clean, and their ego is in the way. And so I went to speak to somebody yesterday about it, sort of unrelated, but I was still anxious to hear her insight. And she's like, do you have a shrink? You need a shrink. You got a lot of anger. And she's not wrong. I do have a lot of anger about it because I came to this project from a place of love. And when you're ignored, um, part because I'm a woman and they like men, they're amazing. Part because of that, and part because they don't want to, and maybe they're hiding something, maybe they're not. I don't know yet. But for all those reasons, I did get angry. I am angry. They are failing at their job. If you went into McDonald's and someone was doing this bad of a job, somebody would step in and help. There's no one at this time to do that. But it was so funny because she's like, you need a shrink, you need to, and it's funny because do I? So back to, who are you using as your shrink, and should you be hiring someone? So I'm still going to continue, venting it to my family and friends. And I know how lucky I am that I have them to release it to. But it's an interesting thing is, what is your outlet? Are you journaling? Are you podcasting? Are you putting it on Facebook? What is your outlet to get the information out? But the other side of it is, are you receiving the information that can help you? And I do think I've gotten better about it. Sometimes I realize that criticism is constructive. Sometimes it's not, and that's okay. And it's how how you digest it and how you let it impact you, right? I called my sister today and I said, I'm trying not to let the weather on the outside, impact the weather on the inside. And it's so hilarious, but you have to be careful of that, and make sure that you're venting to people that will, support you and that aren't happy that you're miserable or suffering. So, But the reason I want to share the story of my dad is that I think it's important to show that even in your lowest, most horrifying moments of your life, when you are sort of ready to be done, not living, but done, creating, and done, being successful, and just throw in the towel and raise your kids and live your life, because that's where I was. I remember sitting in that car on the way to the hospital, and I was like, I'm out. I'll do what I got to do, love who I got to love, but I don't have any goals for myself. Um, but it's not what happens later once the veil of grief starts to lift. I have a friend going through grief right now. She unexpectedly lost her son, and I don't. My parents lost my brother many years ago, and I have no idea how they continued living. I actually have no clue, but I know that they're strong. Like, my friend is strong, and they were able to look for the good and continue and find um, things worth living for. So their other children, or their animals, or their job, or themselves. And but it changes you forever, as most of us know. Um, so my best friend, who I mentioned, I believe, in a different post, she wanted to buy an investment property for a group home. My father purchased it. He went over there with my mother with a mask on during COVID. We were very careful. Um, and he respected the illness. He went over there with the mask on and walked through the home, looked at the deck, spoke to them for a few minutes. She called me. This is sort of a recap. She called me and told me that she was positive. I didn't know what she was positive for. And then I called him, and he said, "Oh shoot, I've had a sniffle for a couple days," and we thought they were fine. They went to my mom and dad went to, there was like a drive-through testing center at the time at the hospital, not our hospital that we would ever go to, but the one they went to was the one we went to that the friends had gone to. They got swabbed, and they got their results quickly. I mean, within a day. My mom was negative. My dad was positive. I know that he was scared. I know that we all were. Um, I remember it was just before Halloween, and he was sitting, he took like over like the office den. He didn't want my mom in there with him. He said he just did not want her to get it. She would bring him soup and things, but we would talk to him through the window because it was like by the front driveway, but he did not want anybody to get it. And so even as he was suffering, and I don't think any of us realized quite how much, because he was going to make sure we didn't know. He's still worried about us. Don't, no, my mom, don't come near me, honey. No, no, just put it outside, in the hallway. So he was home for 3 weeks, approximately, maybe not quite. Like, so from just before Halloween uh, till November 5th. So November 6th, we were going to have like a drive-by for his birthday. He was turning 80, and we canceled it because he went to the hospital November 5th. He had been checking his pulse ox constantly. I would text him all night. I wasn't sleeping because I wanted to check on him. And he would say, he's checking his pulse ox, and it's a little bit hard to breathe, and so on. And so by the time we were ready, he was ready to go to the hospital. He was on the phone, with his doctor, and they didn't like do a steroid or anything like that. It was like no one really knew what to do. So we called the ambulance, and he's like, "Don't let them, put the lights on." So I said, "Can you like just have them drive up and get him?" And they said, "We don't control what they do." So of course they came blazing in, and you could see the looks on their faces. They had been through this before. They checked his oxygen. They did put him on oxygen then, and he said he felt a bit better, and I'm sure he did because he was very low. Um, and they wanted to take him to a close by hospital, but his doctor was running, he knew that they were running trials at the other hospital a little bit further away. So he went there. The 6th was his birthday. He was doing great. I mean, for in those terms. And we weren't able to see him, but we brought cookies, and the nurse met us down, and she brought up, decorated cookies. And she said he's doing good. Somewhere between that day and the next 2 weeks, they moved him to ICU because in case they had to intubate him, they wanted him where he needed to be. So he wanted to stay strong. He said, I don't want to watch the news. I don't want anything to impact how I'm doing. I just want to heal, focus on healing. But he had said some things before. So he would say, when we were talking about the disease, the disease, he's like, I'm going to be 80 years old. I need to be very careful. But he had no health conditions, but he just knew that he needed to be careful. His lease, my mother's lease, was up on her car. They've never not had 2 cars. He's always gone to the office or wherever, and she's had her day life. But he went and got a car that he could fit golf clubs in. And he said, when COVID's over, we'll get you your car. So there were just things that in hindsight sort of like mapped out perfectly. He was at the hospital. He wasn't doing well. They had him on the high flow oxygen. We would FaceTime him a little bit. They had like their own FaceTime system that you could go through. But it was hard for him to talk because talking takes breath. He went on remdesivir. He went on ketamine. He's very sensitive to meds, but he was willing to try anything. He said, he's like, I can help other people with this. Who is selfless in that moment when you're fighting for your life? And I don't think we realized that he was fighting for his life. I, in hindsight, think that he did. I spoke to the attending physician one day because I got a text in the middle of the night one night, and it was a giant heart. And the fact that he was even like so emoji conscious, and it was like one of those huge ones. I don't even think I've seen it since. And he said, what's happening? And like to me, and I didn't realize what happened when I called the nurse, some night nurse, young girl. She definitely learned exactly how I felt about her. But my dad didn't even drink caffeine. He was very sensitive. And he had like an oxygen on, and when he was falling asleep, he was explaining to her that he was like asleep, but here, because the water from the oxygen mask was leaking on him. So he was explaining that to her, and she decided that meant he was having a psychotic break, and she gave him a psychiatric drug, and his heart started racing, and whatever coincidence that was sort of the beginning of the end. The attending agreed that certainly was not a psychotic break, that he was expressing how he felt as he was falling asleep, that he felt like he was half asleep, half awake, because of this dripping. But, there's a lot of power over there. And I said, this is a man who doesn't sleep all night anyway. He works half the night. He's up walking the floors. So you just want your people to be sleeping all night. So you just give them stuff to put them to sleep. So after that, he continued to decline. We were not able to go to the hospital. At one point they said you could send one at a time. My dad said, absolutely not. No one is coming near this. Again, because he was the last person of importance in his mind. He was always protecting us. So so there was a nurse that was there at the beginning, and then she was supposed to go get married. So she took some days off, but then she actually postponed her wedding until after COVID. So she went back, and she called me one day. We were talking, and she said, your dad's not quite the same. She's like, he was always so positive and had energy, and was talking to the doctors and mentoring them. And now I'm just reminding him to breathe slow. But you can tell someone to breathe slow, but if they can't breathe, no one wants to breathe slowly. So a little bit later, she called and she said, we have to put him on the vent. If you talk to him today, he would say, yes, I want to go on it. Like, he's very uncomfortable. He had tried everything. We brought ice cream and candies and things that he likes, but he couldn't even really eat those because you have to breathe to eat. So he would take a little bite of a candy and, spit it out. So she called and she said, if you want to talk to him, we're going to go in there and I'm going to put him on speakerphone on my cell phone. I'll call you back. So I got my mom on the phone and she was crying, and I said, all right, be strong. Dad's going to talk to us. We got to tell him to go handle it. So she called us and we were like, go kick its ass. We'll talk to you in a couple days. And she said he gave a thumbs up. She said, okay, we're going to do this. Ugh, I hate this part. So I called, so she said she'd call me in like 10 minutes or something or whatever it was. And so 20 minutes later, I called her and I said, what, can I speak to her? And they said, oh, she's in a patient's room. And I said, she's still in my dad's room. And the woman's like, hold on. And she gets this woman on the phone who I'm sure they thought was better to speak to the family, but maybe she shouldn't. And she was like, hello, ma'am. I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, well, your father's heart lost rhythm. And I was like, listen, I'm not medical. Dumb it down. What are you talking about? And she's like, your father's heart stopped when they put the vent in. They're trying to resuscitate him now. You should come here. And I'm like, oh, we should come there? You wouldn't let us come there all these weeks, but we should come there? Sure. So, like, your world literally, like, flashes before you. It goes dark. All the things they say happen really do. I called my husband and I was like, you have to come get me. We have to go get my mom. And he's like, I have to close up at the office. So my kids were home and I ran in the car, got my mom, and I had to go tell her, which is perhaps the most disgusting thing that you ever have to do in your life. But when I was driving there, I had my sisters on Duo. Not all of us had FaceTime. And the phone rang in between. My husband was going to meet us at my mom's and drive to the hospital, but I knew I had to get to my mom, and she was only like 5 minutes away. So I drove there. The phone rang, and it was the hospital, and I told my sisters to hold on, and they got through, and they said, we're so sorry. And I'm like, what are you screaming? What are you talking about? Like, what happened? Like, what the fuck happened? And they said that when they put the vent in, it was almost like too much. Like he had been struggling to breathe for so many days that when the oxygen went in, it was like too much and his heart stopped. So I went to my mom's. I now have to drive to my mom's, and instead of saying, let's go see dad, like I have to say, let's go see dad. So we go out, I go and she comes out to the garage and my sisters are on the phone and I'm like, how am I going to do this? And she comes out with a little caboodle, those little like Tupperware, the handle that I had just bought. So I bought them to decorate, and she's like an artist. I'm not. And so she had written my son's name on it, and she put his lollipops, like his name and then lollipops. And so he's obsessed, or I'm sorry, Tootsie Pops. So he's obsessed with Tootsie Pops. And she's like walking out, and I'm thinking to myself, like, it's funny what flashes through your mind, but I'm like, her world has already been uprooted and it's literally going to change forever right now. And she's thinking about her grandson. My son has autism, and she's thinking about her autistic grandson and his little Tootsie Pops, and now he has a carry case for them because they're his favorite. And then I had to tell her, but I'm not super affectionate. I mean, like a little bit, but I'm just like, it's not my thing. And so I went up and hugged her, and she knew right away. She's like, is he gone? And then she threw her purse, and it was horrifying. And then, you have to somehow function when you don't even want to breathe anymore, frankly. So my husband showed up a couple minutes later, and we drove in the backseat. He drove us, and it's like a 25-minute ride. My niece met us there. My sister stayed on the phone with us. And the friend that gave him COVID, this is awful. This is awful. This is an awful memory. But anyways, the friend that gave him COVID was texting me, and they knew he was going in for the vent. So she was like, and so I don't remember the text, but my friends, it was a group chat. My friends have recounted it for me, but she said, how's it going or something? And I said, he's gone. And she said, oh, you mean he's on the vent? And I said, I don't even remember it, but no, shut up. He's gone. So then they obviously started their own text without me. And, my other dear friend called when I told her, and she said she still remembers it. She was like pumping gas, and she's like, what are you talking about? But she called me, and I was in the car with my mom. Like, I couldn't communicate. I emailed a medium friend of mine, which I will talk about next week, and she did a reading for me in the car. And I said, I've never done that before. And I said, we're on the way to see my dad. What the fuck is going on? What happened? And she told me. And it was awful, but it was good. It was like I needed it. I just want to say, sort of jump ahead, but when you are going through the worst times in your life, that's when you know who is here for you. That's when you know who your partner really is. I wanted to spend every minute at my mom's with her. I'm not totally proud of the things that I did in that moment. My ex-brother-in-law, who was always like a brother, came over and I was like yelling from the kitchen, like, tell him to leave. I think that you're sort of almost outside of yourself in those moments. I mean, here he was being so compassionate and considerate to come see his mother-in-law, and it just, I don't know. It's a hard time. But my husband, I tend to do the housework. My husband cleaned the entire house, did all the laundry. I mean, I had 6 clean baskets of laundry in my laundry room, like taking over before this happened. And the house was perfect. The kids were perfect. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. Never forget that when I needed him to step up, I didn't even have to ask. Friends sent food. They sent my kids' favorite chicken strips. I mean, they dropped off books. My friend from high school and her sister, who I adore them both, they had this picture made of like silhouettes of our family picture. And then they had my dad, like my sisters, me, my mom. Then they had my dad hugging my brother who passed away. And they were both like wearing halos. It was the most meaningful, all our friends, I mean, and then some of them didn't. Mostly my mom's friends didn't step up. Where were they? She's been there for everyone our whole lives. My father was there for everyone. But she always says that when her father died, he was her person, like my dad was my person. And, she got like gifts for her wedding, and they were like regifts and things like that. And she said, oh, because, they knew he wouldn't be able to reciprocate. Like, people are just interesting. And you see the underbelly. You see such good, but you see such bad. In fact, there was a woman we later met. Ironically, she was my kid's librarian's mother from like elementary school, her mother. My mom would see them out to dinner. My parents would see them out, but they didn't really know each other. After her husband died first, I think, also from COVID, but as a complication, he was in a surgery, went to a rehab, got COVID, blah, blah, blah. They didn't even really know each other, but she made sure my mother was included no matter what. If she was going out to breakfast, hey, do you want to meet us? Didn't care if they were friends with the other person. I call her the includer. And so you really see who's there. That's when during those times. But anyway, so, okay, sorry, I digress. So, we go to the hospital, and we meet my niece there, and we walk in, and someone meets us there, and she gives us a bag. Oh, no, that's not what happened. That was later. They gave us his bag of stuff, but we go in there and we say, we're here for this. And she says, okay, you go this way and turn at the elevator. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, we're not functioning. Where do we go? And this woman said, I'll take you. And it turned out that she was like one of the hospital administrators that was helping because they were short-staffed, obviously, during this chaotic time. She got on the elevator with us, and the elevator stopped for 1 hour. It was horrible. My mom is claustrophobic. We're devastated. We're going to see my father for the last time. Gross. And she is on there with us, but I believe in divine intervention. She doesn't even do that job. She had every single person's number. She had like the director of the hospital's number in her phone. She had the number of the person who was supposed to unlock it. He had stepped out with the key. We called the fire department. We called them back. Are you coming? Oh, no one came. Nope. An hour later, we get out of the elevator, and they have us like suit up because now we're going to COVID. And we see all the doctors and nurses are crying for my father, which says it all, because I can't even fathom and begin to even tell you how many people cried for my father. We got letters from successful billionaires, millionaires, clients, friends, relatives, people you didn't even know were impacted because of how much he mentored them. It was actually amazing. Not surprising, but amazing. So we got to see him for a few minutes, and my sisters were on, the phone with us. My niece was with us, and it was awful. And we, in that time after, we learned, like I mentioned, exactly who was there for us. But I also felt that it was the epitome of validation that we come here for lessons. We come here to learn what we're going to learn, to achieve what we're going to achieve, and then we go. And even my mom, who has experienced so much love and so much grief in her life, and so has my dad. But I've even seen her grow and achieve since my dad died, even though she didn't want to go on, and she didn't understand, because she too got COVID. She didn't understand why she didn't just go with him. And I mean, I get it. I get what she's saying. And it's so interesting because when you lose a parent, I don't ever want to know what the people that lose a child experience. I know that I'm the surviving daughter of people who lost a child, and I don't know how they go on in life. When you lose a parent, it's like you almost don't even know who you are. I don't even want to think about what happens when you lose both. But I've told my mom that as much as I know that I'll never function the same because she's everything, there's a difference I really feel will be a difference, because when the other parent is already there waiting, if you will. But I think you're there for lessons, and you're there for you know to grow and learn and achieve what you're here for. And then you go. And so I was recently, my cousin is involved in Broadway, and he wrote his memoir. But prior to that, I had read the Coffee Table book, and I was around when it was first released, the play, the Broadway musical Rent. And the writer of that is named Jonathan Larson, and he was like in his 30s, and he was a waiter, like every struggling Broadway, person, actor, writer. And he finally wrote, this masterpiece. And it had taken a few years to tweak it. And he wrote the book, he wrote the screenplay, and they had the off-Broadway rehearsal. And it was going to be the first night before the show went, live off Broadway in this theater, and the critics were coming, and the people were talking about it already, and it was going to be a hit. And I think he knew that. I know that he knew in some capacity, but he went home after that first I think it was a dress rehearsal, but either way, it was like the main rehearsal before the off Broadway show. And he went home and he died of a heart attack. And so, to me, even though I knew the story, when I reread it recently, it was a reminder to me that he came, he conquered, he achieved. He didn't get a chance to enjoy it. His family had to do that on his behalf. He changed a lot of people's lives. He changed the lives of the actors, the producers, the directors, people that saw the show. He changed millions of lives. But he achieved his journey, and then he was done. And I can't believe that he died literally the day before everything changed, but it's very poetic. Um, and I just really think that that's what it's all about. You know, you're never the same, the people that are left here, but there's something about what we know is beyond. And I think that gets us through. I know for me, the dreams that I have about my dad get me through. Um, Knowing what his legacy is and what he's left behind for strangers and his loved ones, strangers being acquaintances, friends, and then his relatives. And then when we're struggling, we all call each other and we already know what he would say, so he was able to leave that print for us. But it sucks. It sucks. And so the question you ask yourself is, are you able to get through the hard times without a therapist, or should you be in therapy, or are you using your own makeshift version of therapy? So I would love to hear what you're in therapy for, or what you think you should be in therapy for. um People are people pod at gmail.com. If you want to send in your stories, we would love to hear them. And just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. I have recently learned of people who are just now addressing their childhood trauma. Some are not gonna get over it. Some are not going to forgive their parents or their siblings or their abuser, and it's true, they're not going to. But if you can find a way to get there, not for the other person, for you. Um I was bullied as a kid by my best friend, and it wasn't until, I mean, we she apologized, in 7th grade, but what did that do for me from 3rd through 7th? I mean, I made other friends, but it's heartbreak. And when she died, I was pregnant with my first son, and I still grieve her. I mourned her that day. I still grieve for her. Because you can forgive the person and what they did, and still know that it was wrong and that it was hurtful, and the people who joined in were wrong and didn't even know why they were joining in. They didn't even know the story. But you can heal from the pain and still grow. And so it's funny, I will talk more about it next week, but I actually had it's called um had it done by a shaman, and I'm gonna look up the name of it and everything, but it's basically a soul retrieval, and they go and collect your little shattered pieces, and they pack them back together, and they put them back and give them back to you because they're yours. So if you can even try to do that, meditate on it and find your shattered pieces, because we're all victims of heartbreak in one way or another. Find your shattered pieces, or go to a shaman and have them find your shattered pieces. Put them back together and try to heal yourself the best you can. Nurture yourself and go back to the child in you and tell them it's going to be okay, because it sucks and life is really hard, but it's really beautiful too. And so find the good the best way that you can, and let us know. Email me and tell me your stories and how you're finding your good, and even if you're still struggling. So people are peoplepod at gmail.com. And what